These are the two most ruthless men in Europe. It's 1942 and for years, Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler have held the continent in an iron grip, controlling territory all the way from Norway to Libya. Things are looking great, and they're looking forward to reaping the rewards of their long-lasting campaign. But underneath the surface, cracks are already forming, and soon, Italy's war effort is starting to break down. 3 years later, Benito Mussolini is laying slumped next to an obscure wall in Italy, deceased. Everything around him has fallen apart, so how did he go from being one of the most powerful men in the world to this in such a short time? You're looking at Dino Grandi. He is one of the fascist party's top leaders. For a while, he has appeared as Mussolini's right-hand man and one of the most powerful men in Italy. But behind the curtains, most of his power is gone. Mussolini had stripped it in early 1943, even after his staunch loyalty to the party. Despite this, he is still preserved as a prominent member of the Grand Council of Fascism. This was a mistake, and soon Mussolini would pay for it. See, the Grand Council worked in a way that ultimately turned against Mussolini's interests. It allowed his own fascist leadership to vote him out if they felt it was necessary. However, he never actually expected them to use that power. At the time, Mussolini wanted the same unchecked power his German ally enjoyed, but in reality he had to share it with the Italian king, who had the ultimate last say over the army, who was also the only man in Italy who could fire the prime minister. This was a problem. However, Mussolini had utilised the passivity and extreme caution of Victor Emmanuel III to his advantage. He had fully convinced him that the Italian military campaigns were under control, but it was crumbling. The Royal Italian Army had catastrophic results defending their territory in North Africa. Within a few years, he had lost Libya, and their invasion of France went wrong. It was shut down almost instantly by an already defeated nation, costing Mussolini hundreds of men. And now, in early July 1943, Allied forces had landed in Sicily, including America, who had increased drafting numbers drastically over the last 3 years. The Italian forces are completely overwhelmed. Within a month, Sicily was lost, and the Allied forces could now utilize their airfields. Mussolini had proven to the Italian people and the Grand Council that he was incapable of keeping Italy safe. But even as everything is falling apart, the king is still terrified to confront Mussolini. So Dino Grandi was becoming fearful of the future of Italy. When Mussolini and the rest of the Grand Council met on the 24th of July 1943, a speech is made by Mussolini that reveals the German plan to evacuate the south of Italy. Grandi is unhappy. He starts publicly attacking his own boss. He first read his Ordine del Giorno Grandi, famously known as the ODG in front of Mussolini and his most brutal fascists. He reads that Mussolini had not only betrayed the constitution, but the fascist movement itself, and it demanded the king retake his full powers. Grandi finished with Mussolini's own quote, "Let all factions perish, so that the nation may live." Mussolini was completely silent. During a brief break, Grandi rapidly collected signatures for his ODG, creating a coup inside Mussolini's own palace. But if he failed, if the vote fell Mussolini's way, Grandi would be executed by nightfall. So he had hidden 2 grenades so he could take out himself and Mussolini. Mussolini warned that approving Grandi's motion would destroy fascism, that the Allies wanted Italy erased, and that if the king still trusted him, all who voted against him would suffer severe consequences. His words shook many present. Grandi started accusing Mussolini of blackmailing them, saying loyalty to Italy stood above loyalty to one man. The day after, the Grand Council was set to vote for or against Mussolini. The result? 19-8, in favour of Dino Grandi. What Mussolini thought was impossible was now happening. This vote ended his leadership instantly, but he showed little visible reaction. On the same day, Mussolini is arrested. By this point, frustration with Mussolini was so widespread that his removal, once broadcast on the radio, went completely unopposed. But the Italian government now had a big problem. In early September, the Italians signed the Armistice of Cassibile, which officially surrendered Italy to the Allied forces. However, when the Germans realized the truth a few months earlier, they stationed troops deep inside Italy. And as the armistice is signed, Italian soldiers residing in the occupied areas in the Balkans and Italy are disarmed instantly. Those who were able to followed King Victor Emmanuel III and the newly appointed Prime Minister Pietro Badoglio south to Allied protection. However, about 800,000 soldiers were immediately arrested and deported to the Third Reich, or shot in some cases. This was terrible news for the Kingdom of Italy. Deep inside the newly gained German territory, Mussolini had been left behind at the Gran Sasso Hotel far up in the mountains, well guarded and in harsh terrain where no vehicles could drive, so the German SS needed an exceptional tool to rescue him. With no road access and no way to approach the Italian Italian ex-prime minister, the Germans brought in military gliders, and soon they were released over the mountains, steering onto the flat ground beside the hotel. In total, around 100 men had landed. Before the guards understood what was happening, they were already deep inside, and Mussolini was taken from the building within minutes. Meanwhile, a plane had landed on the mountain. Mussolini and a few SS members quickly left on that plane. He was finally a free man. Over the next few years, Mussolini acted as a puppet leader in the Northern Italian Social Republic. By the start of 1945, he stated, "7 years ago, I was an interesting person. Now, I am little more than a corpse." But he had no idea that his final days would be far worse. As the Allied troops were advancing towards northern Italy, Mussolini and his wife Clara Petacci quickly tried to escape into Switzerland so they could board a plane to fascist Spain. But it went terribly wrong. Not even 2 days into his escape, Mussolini and his convoy is stopped and arrested by communist partisans waiting along the road near Lake Como. As they were inspecting his vehicle, they noticed something was wrong and pulled him and Clara out. Soon, a car arrived. Mussolini and Clara were forced into it and driven to a nearby village. As they arrived, they were forced out and told to stand against a villa wall. One of the partisans walked up to the site, armed with a machine pistol, and pulled the trigger. It was jammed. For a few seconds, everyone was silent, and Mussolini said nothing. Then the man took a second weapon and opened fire onto the couple. Mussolini was dead. On that same day, the corpses of Mussolini and Clara are loaded into a van alongside other executed fascists. Later in the evening, they were dumped in the middle of the Piazzale Loreto Square, the same place where 15 partisans had been shot a year earlier. Crowds start forming, and soon they begin kicking and punching their lifeless bodies. By the end of it, Mussolini's face looked like a ghoul, and after a while, the bodies were hung by their feet onto a framework overlooking the square. Partisans were worried that someone would try to steal, or even completely tear the bodies apart, but by the time his body was raised, the damage had already been done. In the years after Mussolini's death, Italy reshaped itself completely. The war ended, the monarchy was abolished, and a new republic took its place. The country was completely broke, but recovery came faster than anyone expected. By the mid-1950s, Italy was rebuilding its cities, reopening its factories, and beginning the economic rise that would later be called its post-war miracle. For many Italians, Mussolini's end wasn't just the fall of a leader. It was the closing of an era they were determined never to return to.